Dawn breaks over Pine Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, painting the Ponderosa. Pines as gold as Dr. Margaret Sullivan. Starts another ordinary day of animal care. But an unmarked cardboard box at the gate shatters the routine. Inside, 5 feverish orphaned kittens tremble. In the cold, meet Bella, a rescued bobcat with golden eyes who'd been pacing her enclosure for days, as if sensing something coming. As the staff weigh an unthinkable idea, entrusting fragile house kittens to a wild predator's paws. Bella was initially cautious, but quickly accepted them, grooming and cuddling them as if they were her real babies. Despite her large size, she was incredibly gentle, and the zoo staff trusted her completely. This is the extraordinary, true story of a bobcat who became a serial foster mother, the tiny lives she saved, and the sanctuary that discovered love might be the wildest force of all. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning mist hung heavy over Pine Valley Wildlife Sanctuary in northern Colorado, casting ghostly tendrils through the towering Ponderosa pines. Dr. Margaret Sullivan, the sanctuary's lead veterinarian, pulled her truck up to the main building, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. She'd been running this place for 20 years, but some mornings still took her breath away, not from the beauty but from the weight of responsibility. "Morning, Doc," called out Jake Martinez, the head keeper, from the bobcat enclosure. "Bella's been pacing since dawn. Something's got her attention." Margaret frowned. Bella, their rescued bobcat, had always been special. Found as a tiny cub at a shutdown fur farm 5 years ago, she'd arrived half dead, riddled with parasites, and terrified of everything. The first months had been touch and go. Margaret had bottle-fed her, slept beside her enclosure, and slowly coaxed the wild spirit back into those golden eyes. "Probably just the change in weather," Margaret said, but she walked over to check anyway. Bella sat at the fence line, her tufted ears swiveling, amber eyes focused on something beyond the sanctuary grounds. That afternoon, everything changed. The cardboard box appeared at the sanctuary gate like an accusation. No note, no explanation, just 5 tiny lives mooing desperately in the cold. Margaret's assistant, Emily Chen, found them during her rounds. "Doc, we've got a situation." Emily's voice crackled over the radio. Margaret's heart sank as she looked into the box. 5 kittens, maybe 4 weeks old, huddled together for warmth. 2 orange tabbies, 2 gray and 1 black, with white paws. Their eyes were crusty, noses running, and they were dangerously thin. "Get them to the clinic," Margaret ordered, her professional demeanor masking her anger at whoever had abandoned these babies. In the warmth of the veterinary clinic, Margaret and Emily worked to stabilize the kittens. For fluids for dehydration, antibiotics for the upper respiratory infections, and careful syringe feeding with kitten formula. The black kitten with white paws, Emily had already started calling him Boots, was the weakest, his temperatures dropping. Emily said, worry etching her young face. Margaret grabbed heating pads and created a makeshift incubator. "Come on, little one," she whispered gently, rubbing the kitten's chest to stimulate breathing. For 3 days and nights, they fought for those 5 lives. The sanctuary staff took shifts, feeding every 2 hours, administering medications, providing the constant care abandoned kittens desperately need. Margaret barely left the clinic, catching catnaps on the worn leather couch between feedings. It was Jake who first suggested the unthinkable. "You know," he said during a 3 a.m. feeding session, "Bella's been acting strange lately, ever since we moved those bear cubs to the larger sanctuary. Last month she seemed lonely." Margaret looked up from the gray kitten she was feeding. Max and Toby, 2 orphaned black bear cubs, had been Bella's first foster children. It had happened by accident, a temporary housing situation that turned into something extraordinary. Bella had groomed them, played with them, even shared her food. The cubs had thrived under her care, until they grew too large and needed to be relocated. "Jake, these are domestic kittens. Bella's a wild bobcat. A wild bobcat who was raised by humans," Jake countered. "Who lived with Rocky the raccoon for 2 years, who mothered bear cubs. She's not exactly typical." Margaret set down the now satisfied kitten. The idea was insane. Bobcats were solitary predators. Even hand-raised, they retained their wild instincts. But then again, nothing about Bella had ever been typical. "The kittens need constant care," Emily added softly. "We're all exhausted. And Bella, you've seen how gentle she is. Against every protocol, every bit of conventional wisdom." Margaret found herself considering it. She thought about Bella's unique history. Rescued from horror, raised with love, somehow maintaining a perfect balance between wild and gentle. She thought about Rocky, the mischievous raccoon who'd been Bella's companion until his death last year. The two had been inseparable, grooming each other, sharing meals, proving that nature's rules weren't always absolute. "We'd have to do it carefully," Margaret heard herself sing. Very carefully. The introduction began with scent. Margaret rubbed towels on the kittens, then placed them in Bella's enclosure. The bobcat's reaction was immediate and intense. She sniffed the towels, then began calling, a sound none of them had heard before. Somewhere between her usual chirps and a deeper rumbling purr. That's a maternal call," Jake whispered, awe in his voice. Next came visual contact. Margaret held the strongest kitten, one of the orange tabbies, where Bella could see but not reach. The bobcat pressed against the fence, her whole body quivering with interest, making soft, encouraging sounds. "I can't believe this," Emily breathed. The first physical introduction happened a week later. Margaret chose the strongest kitten, the orange tabby they'd named Rusty, with Jake standing by with safety equipment, though they all prayed it wouldn't be needed. Margaret placed Rusty in Bella's enclosure and stepped back. What happened next would be burned into Margaret's memory forever. Bella approached slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She sniffed the kitten, who mooed pitifully. Then, with infinite gentleness, Bella picked up Rusty by the scruff, exactly as a mother cat would, and carried him to her favorite corner, a sheltered area with soft bedding. She began grooming him. Within an hour, all 5 kittens were in Bella's enclosure, pressed against her warm fur, nursing instinctively even though Bella had no milk. The bobcat curled around them protectively, her purr a constant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "She's adopting them," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "She's actually adopting them." The weeks that followed were nothing short of miraculous. Bella became the most devoted mother any of them had ever seen. She groomed each kitten meticulously, carried them gently when they strayed too far, and even attempted to teach them to hunt using toy mice. The staff provided the sanctuary security. Cameras captured extraordinary moments. Bella patiently tolerating tiny claws, climbing her back, allowing the kittens to pounce on her twitching tail, curling protectively around them during Colorado's cold nights. When staff brought bottles for feeding, the kittens still needed formula. Bella would watch intently, sometimes helping by holding a kitten in position with a gentle paw. Boots, the weakest kitten, became Bella's special project. While the others grew strong and playful, he remained smaller, more fragile. Bella seemed to sense this, giving him extra grooming, keeping him closest to her warm belly, carrying him more often than the others. It's like she knows he needs more help, Emily observed, watching Bella nudge Boots toward a food dish. Word of the unusual family spread through the wildlife rehabilitation community, then beyond. Visitors came from across the country to witness the bobcat who'd adopted domestic kittens. Margaret struggled with the attention. The sanctuary's first priority was always the animal's welfare, but she recognized the educational opportunity. This shows the complexity of animal behavior, she told a group of veterinary students. It challenges our assumptions about instinct versus learned behavior, about the capacity for cross-species bonding. Hunter arrived on a setting November day. The male bobcat had been hit by a car in Wyoming, his left rear leg badly damaged. After surgery and initial recovery at a wildlife hospital, he needed a permanent home. The leg would never be strong enough for life in the wild. We'll keep them separated, Margaret told the staff. The last thing we need is territorial aggression with the kittens in Bella's enclosure. But Bella had other ideas. From the moment Hunter arrived, she showed intense interest. Not aggressive, not fearful, but curious. She led her kitten parade to the fence line between their enclosures, as if showing them off. Hunter, for his part, seemed bewildered but not hostile. He watched the strange family with what could only be described as confusion, limping on his healing leg to get a better view. Should we be worried? Emily asked. Margaret studied the two bobcats' body language. I don't think so. Look at their ears. Forward, relaxed, no bristling, no defensive postures. They're just interested. As Hunter healed, a courtship of sorts began. Bella would bring the kittens to the fence. Hunter would chirp softly. Once Margaret caught him pushing a piece of his food through the fence, an offering to the kittens. He's trying to help provide for them, Jake said, amazed. He's accepting her adopted family. By December, the kittens were 3 months old, rambunctious teenagers who treated their bobcat mother with the casual disrespect typical of all adolescents. They climbed on her during her naps, play fought over her food, and generally made her life chaotic. Through it all, Bella remained patient, only occasionally cuffing them gently when their play became too rough. The sanctuary faced a dilemma. The kittens were domestic cats. They belonged in homes, not in a wildlife sanctuary. But how do you separate babies from the only mother they'd known? And what would it do to Bella? We have to think long-term, Margaret said during a staff meeting. These kittens deserve homes where they can be house cats. And Bella, she needs to be able to bond with Hunter, maybe have cubs of her own. The adoption process began slowly. The sanctuary was flooded with applications. Everyone wanted a kitten raised by a bobcat. Margaret interviewed families carefully, looking for those who understood these weren't ordinary kittens. They'd been raised by a wild mother, had learned behaviors most cats never would. The first to go was Rusty, adopted by a wildlife photographer who lived on 40 acres in Montana. The man, Tom Harrison, had followed the story from the beginning and promised to send regular updates. Bella's distress at Rusty's departure was heartbreaking. She called for him for days, searching every corner of her enclosure. The remaining kittens seemed to sense her sadness, staying closer, grooming her face as she'd groomed theirs. "Maybe we're making a mistake," Emily said, watching Bella pace. "No," Margaret said firmly, though her heart ached. "We're doing what's right. For everyone. Bella will adapt. She's the strongest soul I know." One by one, the kittens found homes. The Gray sisters went together to a retired couple in Oregon who had a cat-proof garden where they could safely explore. The other orange tabby went to a family with children who'd lost their previous cat to cancer. Boots was the last to go. His adopter was special, Dr. Lisa Morgan, a veterinarian who specialized in special needs cats. Boots had developed a mild neurological condition, likely from his rough start that made him a bit wobbly. "He's perfect," Lisa said, cradling him. "I have 2 other special needs cats at home. He'll fit right in." The day Boots left was hard. Bella knew something was happening. Groomed him extra thoroughly that morning, then carried him to Margaret when she entered the enclosure as if saying, "Goodbye. You did so good, Mama." Margaret whispered to Bella, tears flowing freely. "You saved them all." The sanctuary felt empty without the kittens' chaotic energy. Bella was subdued for weeks, spending more time at the fence line with Hunter. The staff watched anxiously, worried about depression, about whether they'd made the right choice. Then the photos started arriving. Rusty in Montana perched on Tom's shoulder while he photographed eagles. The Gray sisters in their garden paradise stalking butterflies. The orange tabby surrounded by laughing children. And Boots, wobbly but happy, curled up with his new special needs siblings. "Look, Bella," Margaret would say, holding her tablet to show the Bobcat. "Your babies are happy." Whether Bella understood or not, she began to perk up. The bond with Hunter grew stronger. By spring, Margaret made the decision to introduce them properly. The introduction was anticlimactic. Hunter entered Bella's enclosure cautiously, favoring his weak leg. Bella approached, sniffed him, then began grooming his face. Within minutes, they were curled up together in her favorite corner, the same spot where she'd raised the kittens. "Think she'll be a good mother to her own cubs?" Emily asked. "Are you kidding?" Margaret laughed. "She's already proven. She's the best mother in the world. Biology has nothing to do with it." That summer, 2 orphan forest cat kittens arrived at the sanctuary. True wild cats, not domestics. They were older, fiercer, hissing and spitting at everything. "Want to see if Bella's magic works?" Twice, Jake suggested. This time the introduction was rockier. The forest kittens were genuinely wild, untrusting of everything. But Bella was patient. Sat near their temporary enclosure for hours, purring, slow blinking, speaking to them in the universal language of cat comfort. It took 2 weeks, but eventually the larger forest kitten crept close enough to sniff Bella through the fence. Whatever he smelled, perhaps the lingering scent of the domestic kittens, perhaps just Bella's unique maternal presence, it changed something When Margaret finally introduced them, the forest kittens were wary, but not aggressive. Bella didn't try to pick them up as she had the tiny domestics. Instead, she simply existed near them, a calm, reassuring presence. Slowly, they began following her, learning from her, accepting her protection. "She's not just a foster mother," Tom Harrison said when he visited with Rusty, who remembered Bella, and rubbed against her through the fence. "She's a bridge between worlds, wild and domestic, predator and nurturer." By autumn, Bella was confirmed pregnant with Hunter's cubs. The forest kittens had been successfully relocated to a larger wildlife preserve where they could live wild but protected. The sanctuary staff prepared for Bella's first biological offspring with excitement and some anxiety. What if she doesn't feel the same way about her own cubs? Emily worried. Margaret smiled. Bella doesn't love based on species or genetics. She loves based on need. Her cubs will be the luckiest babies in the world. The morning Bella gave birth to 3 perfect bobcat cubs. Snow was falling softly over Pine Valley. Margaret watched through the security cameras as Bella cleaned each cub, her movements confident and sure. Hunter paced outside the birthing den, occasionally chirping softly. But the real magic happened when Jake discovered another box at the sanctuary gate. This time it contained 2 tiny domestic kittens, even younger than the original 5 had been. "Not again," Emily sighed. "What is wrong with people?" Margaret looked at the kittens. One solid black, one orange with white. Then at the monitor showing Bella with her hours-old cubs. "We'll raise them ourselves," she said. "Bella has her paws full." But Bella had other ideas. When she emerged from the den later that day, she immediately scented the air, her ears swiveling toward the clinic. Called that same maternal sound they'd heard with the first kittens. "No way," Jake said. "She can't know they're here." But mothers know. Somehow they always know. After much debate and careful consideration of the cubs' safety, Margaret brought the new kittens for Bella to see through the fence. The bobcat's reaction was immediate. She chirped and purred, then disappeared into her den, emerging with one of her cubs as if to say, "See, I have babies, too." In the end, they compromised. The new kittens were raised in the clinic, but brought for daily visits, with Bella, who groomed them through the fence and purred to them constantly. Her own cubs grew strong and wild, but with a tolerance for small, helpless things that was unusual in bobcats. "She's changed the definition of family," Margaret told a documentary crew that had come to film Bella's story. "She's shown us that love doesn't recognize the boundaries we think exist in nature." The crew captured extraordinary footage. Bella teaching her cubs to hunt, while 2 domestic kittens watched through the fence. Hunter babysitting all the young ones while Bella ate. The strange blended family that challenged everything people thought they knew about wild animals. Dr. Morgan sent regular updates about Boots, who had become something of a celebrity in his own right. Despite his wobbles, he'd learned to climb and hunt toys with determination that reminded everyone of his bobcat mother's perseverance. "He mothers every foster kitten I bring home," Lisa wrote. "It's like he's channeling Bella. Last week I found him grooming an orphan squirrel kit I was rehabilitating." The legacy continues. As winter deepened over Pine Valley, Margaret stood at Bella's enclosure, watching the bobcat family. The cubs, now half-grown, played in the snow while Bella and Hunter lounged Nearby, at the fence, the two newest kittens, now healthy and nearly ready for adoption, played with snowflakes. "You know what amazes me most," Emily said, joining her. "It's not that a Bobcat adopted kittens. It's that she keeps choosing to love, even knowing they'll leave, every time she opens her heart completely." Margaret nodded, thinking of all the lives Bella had touched. The bear cubs now thriving in their own habitat, the 5 original kittens in their loving homes, the forest cats wild and free, her own cubs learning to be bobcats while respecting all life. "Maybe that's the real wildness," Margaret said. "Not the hunting or the solitary nature, but the fierce capacity to love without limits, to mother whoever needs, mothering regardless of species or circumstance." As if hearing her, Bella rose and padded to the fence. She blinked at Margaret, the feline expression of love and trust, then called to the kittens. They scrambled to press against the fence, tiny paws reaching through to touch the massive paw Bella placed there. In that moment, Margaret understood Bella wasn't just a serial foster mother. She was proof that love evolves, adapts, and transcends every boundary we try to place on it. She was wild in the truest sense, untamed by conventional expectations, free to love as broadly and deeply as her great heart demanded. The sanctuary phone rang. Another orphaned creature needing help. No doubt. Margaret smiled, watching Bella gently touch noses with the kittens through the fence. "Pine Valley Wildlife Sanctuary," she answered. "Yes, we specialize in the impossible. Bring them in." Because if Bella had taught them anything, it was that impossible was just another word for opportunity. And love was the wildest force of all. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the sanctuary in pristine white, but inside the enclosures, warmed by fur and love and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family, life thrived in all its magnificent, boundary-breaking glory. Bella's legacy wasn't just the lives she'd saved. It was the truth she'd proven. Family isn't about species or blood. It's about showing up again and again with your whole heart open and your paws ready to hold whoever needs holding. In the end, that's the wildest thing of all.